Welcome back to another episode of EpicEarth. EpicEarth is a podcast for those curious about the STEM fields and the awesome, quirky, and fun experiences and research that is taking place right now. This is episode number 19. May the workforce be with you. So hit that like, follow, or subscribe button, then sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride as we take a journey around this epic Earth.
I found it all so fascinating, just learning all the information.
Nobody told me I couldn't do it, and I loved it.
And now I know how to learn. Like, this is a doable thing.
You know, that's an impact that we can't ignore.
We're back with another episode of EpicEarth. I'm Ashley Bosa, and with me as always, I have my co-host, Brian Rosenblatt.
Hey, happy to be here.
And our returning co-host, who's been here with us for the last couple of episodes. We're excited to have him back, Scott Gauvain.
Howdy.
And so this week I'm going to go off on a rant. Not really a rant, but there's a new video. It's a documentary on Disney Plus called Fire of Love. And I know we're all into volcanoes. Who doesn't love a good volcano story? But if you haven't seen this movie, I actually just started watching it last night, but it's about Katya and Maurice Kraft, who were two volcanologists. They were married, and they traveled around a lot together to all these crazy volcanoes, and they got some incredible footage, which is part of the documentary. A lot of it is based off of their footage that they caught, which is just insane. And as I was watching it, you know, I was thinking like, well, this is really great because it did advance a lot of the stuff that we understand about volcanoes, but in the same respect, a lot of what they did was kind of not the best scientific approach. They did some very dangerous things. They did a lot of stuff that a lot of volcanologists these days would not even consider doing. And so if you watch the video, I just want to make it very clear that, you know, we practice safe science here at BSU, but also like a lot of agencies do as well. And that a lot of what they did, although it was commendable and they advanced the science, it's not how we do science, and we don't recommend doing what they did. Unfortunately, what they did eventually got them killed. They were killed in a pyroclastic density current in 1991 by the Unzen in Japan, the Mount Unzen. And so it's kind of a really sad and tragic story. There's not a whole lot of a spoiler there because it's pretty well known that they got killed by a PDC. But anyway, that was my rant. Watch it though. It's pretty awesome footage of volcanic stuff, and a lot of their stuff is what got me into volcanology in the first place. So
Watch out for PDCs.
Oh, for sure. Don't be near those active volcanoes.
Pyroclastic density currents. One little comment on that. A lot of times documentaries purposefully try to look dangerous. They make things look more dangerous than they actually are.
Yeah.
Nowadays, doesn't seem like that was the case for that one, but
not in that. And it's because it's like their actual footage of them going and exploring these volcanoes. I mean, they are literally standing right next to the vents, and it's like, you know, they're picking up lava with their hands, like obviously in the hazmat suits and stuff, but it's still like, you know, you can see that it's burning their hands. One of them actually stepped into like a mud volcano and burned part of his lip. Like, it's just crazy what they were doing. Like, I was sitting there in shock going like, oh my God, like I would never do that, you know? And so I think it's just like, we have to remember that, yes, they were great in the science, but they were also a little silly, to say the least. So, anyway, getting on to smart and commendable science, I'd like to introduce our guest for today. He's a third-year Ph.D. student here in the Geoscience department at Boise State. He has a master's degree in geography from the University of Alabama. And he has 2 Bachelor of Science degrees, one in wildlife and fisheries management and another in geology from West Virginia University. So he's got a pretty extensive background. Hopefully we'll learn all about it. And right now he's actually, despite all of his field experiences, he is actually now working in geoscience education, which is a sort of newish, I would say, field But anyways, welcome, Greg Shafer.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. And yeah, we're excited to learn about geoscience education and sort of a little bit more about what sort of your research looks like and what that field looks like. We haven't had a lot of educational people on our podcast, so.
I think geoscience education really floats under the radar, especially within geosciences. Everybody thinks of, field-heavy, quantitative work, and then you have geoscience education, which is really qualitative, kind of just slides under and nobody notices it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome though.
It is.
I'm excited about it. Yeah.
Very important.
So to start us off, Greg, do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are? What makes you Greg?
And now,
what makes you you?
So I grew up in West Virginia, pretty small town. The town that I lived in was called Duck, West Virginia.
Duck?
Yep, Duck.
Duck,
West Virginia.
Spelled-
Population was...
Spelled like duck?
Yes. Yeah, population was 37.
Okay.
Wow. Nice.
Or at least that's how many people had an address there.
36, including you.
Yes. So it was a pretty small town. But I couldn't wait to get out. I joined the Marine Corps right as soon as I graduated high school. Did 6 years active duty in the Marines. I was stationed in Camp Lejeune. Did a couple of deployments that got me out to see the world. I was able to see 54 countries while I was while I was in. But that didn't last forever. I got out in 2012, and I went to work for a fracking company in the Marcellus shale boom in West Virginia. It's like the mid-Atlantic states there. So it was West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Ohio. A lot of drilling was happening in that 2010 to 14. So I was part of that. But that put me on the front line of seeing like industry versus like environmental problems.
Mm-hmm.
I'd only ever heard about it. I'd never actually seen it. But then actually working for it, I got to see a lot of the stuff, like a lot of the arguments from both sides. But I grew up, pretty conservative in West Virginia, then went to the military, and then was part of like working in the fracking industry. So I leaned to that side when I got to that stage. But I was trying to understand the argument from the other side, and I didn't have the information that I needed to be able to understand their arguments. So I decided I'd go to school, use my GI Bill. So I enrolled at West Virginia University. Really wasn't sure of like what all they offered degree-wise, so I just picked Wildlife and Fisheries Resource Management because I like to fish. And that degree makes you take 4 physical science classes outside of their curriculum. And I took all of mine consecutively in geology, and I really liked it. And I talked to an advisor in the geology department, and he was like, you're very far along in getting a degree in geology. Would you like to switch over? And I was like, I don't want to give up on wildlife and fisheries, so I just did them both.
Nice.
And then I went on to do a master's degree at Alabama, and I didn't want to give up my background in fisheries management or my background in geology, so I tried to find something that combined them. So the degree program was geography, but my research focused on eco-fluvial geomorphology, so that's really the interaction between living organisms and their environment. And my research specifically focused on how mussels, freshwater mussels, influence river morphology change. So most people, if you talk to them in the geosciences that have an understanding of rivers, will tell you that abiotic processes drive biotic processes. So how the river is shaped and formed dictates what lives in it. That's not always the case. So what I found was mussels in big aggregations will modify the riverbed to their liking, and then that will cause subsequent changes in the river morphology, and it just turns into a system.
That's crazy.
Yeah, they work together. Yep. So I
kind
have
of like your degrees. They're symbiotic.
Yeah,
together.
Just working together. Yeah, so I was doing that, and I was loving it, and it was great. But I was attending a conference in Orange Beach, Alabama. It was an Alabama Water Resources Conference. And somebody there at that conference asked me, like, hey, Greg, what are you going to do when you graduate? I was like, I haven't had to answer this question yet, and I haven't really put much thought into it either. It's like, I don't know. They're like, well, what do you like about what you're doing? And the first thing that came to my mind was teaching. You know, so while I was there, I was funded on a teaching assistantship, as many of us are. And that was my first experience of teaching anything to anyone, anywhere. And I loved it. It was great. I had so much fun doing it. But again, I didn't want to give up on geosciences. So I was like, I'm really not sure. And I told them that I like teaching. And they're like, have you ever heard of Geoscience Education? And I said, no, I have no idea what that is. Like, I'm in geosciences, but I don't know what geoscience education is. Is that like teaching somebody something? They're like, well, yeah, but there's a lot more to it than that. I was like, okay, so whenever we leave here, I'll go check it out. Well, I didn't waste any time. I actually went back to my room that night and hopped on the computer and started researching geoscience education. And I was like, oh, this is it. Like, this is what I want to do. Like, this is where I want to take my career. And I started researching some of the heavy hitters in geoscience education, and I stumbled upon a paper by Karen Viskupik, assistant professor in our department, and I was like, I really like the work that she's doing. So I reached out to her, and I told her, I was like, in an email, I was like, hey, this is my background. This is what I like to do. Are you taking Ph.D. students? And she sat on that email for like a week and a half before she replied back to me. And she said, yes, I would like to take a PhD student, but I've never had a student before. So some might view that as risky, being, the first time advisee type of thing. And I was like, well, Karen, good thing I'm a risk taker. Let's do this. And the next summer, like during COVID, I took a position here as a PhD student with Karen, and I've been working on geoscience education stuff for the last 3 years.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It seems like a non-linear path, but also one which, like, all the pieces just started to fit together, and you really are doing something that you're very passionate about, and that's awesome that you got to this point.
Yeah, it seems like all the chips aligned for you. Like, you were able to find something that exactly encompassed everything you want, and that's really rare. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I talk about this with my students a lot now. I always have students that are panicking about what they are going to do with their career. And they're like, I don't know, and I keep telling them, just be patient, relax. You might not have all the pieces yet. So I don't know how familiar you are with any kind of like career theories, but there's a career theory out there called planned happenstance theory that suggests that you don't have all the information yet to make your next decision. And as students, like especially as an undergraduate student, each semester it's a new class, and some students come into their undergraduate degree being like, this is what I'm going to do. But then they take a class and they're like, oh wow, like I like this. And then they take another class and they're like, oh wow, I like this. And at each one of those steps you're presented with new information, and then you reassess and make a new decision. And sometimes you're going to take a career change, which is what I did at every single step. I made a career change. So
yeah, some of us just take it as a whole and then make the career change later on. But yeah. No, that's true. I love that you tell students that. I think it's important that not all of us figure out what we want to do in life at the age of 18. The stats, I don't even know the stats, but they're pretty high for people changing their degrees or their career paths several times during their lifetime. So if you don't have it figured out, it's okay to take the time to figure it out. And like you said, sometimes it's just about taking the classes and seeing what it is that you like or don't like about that. For me personally, I knew that going through my geology classes, I didn't want to do mineralogy and petrology. They were required courses. I'm glad I got the expertise in it, but I knew right then I didn't want to stay behind a microscope, and then I had to reassess, okay, like if I'm not going to do that, what is it I'm going to do with volcanology? So
right, it's an iterative process.
Completely, yeah. Awesome. So I'm going to jump back a long ways. So I just want to highlight that Greg, at least you used to have a lump of coal. You had an actual lump of coal on your desk.
I still have it.
Yeah. And so correct me if I'm wrong, that is like a family tradition. Like your family was in mining, coal mining. Is that right?
Yep. So pretty much everyone on my dad's side of my family has been in coal mining for some period of time. Even my grandma. My grandma likes to tell the stories of back in the 70s. She used to drive one of those big, huge rock trucks on a strip mine.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Your grandma.
Yeah, my grandma.
That's awesome. Yeah, so that's a completely different world from I know, like what, at least Brian, and Scott and I grew up in, in the West. And coal is almost nowhere to be found except in some, shale deposits and things like that. But like, it's crazy to me. Like on the West or the East Coast, there's so much of that. It's so rampant. It's like, or it used to be.
It's really condensed on the East Coast to that eastern Kentucky, West Virginia, southern Pennsylvania. Like that's about all of it right there. But you can think about coal mining as like, ranching out here on the West. So
it's like the lifestyle that people have in the.
Well, I think about it more like, it doesn't employ a lot of people, but to those people that it does employ, it is like everything to them.
Yeah.
So all the towns in West Virginia, especially like the one I grew up in, it's all like heavily reliant on coal. Coal only like employs 10 or 15,000 people in West Virginia, in a state that has 2 million people that lives in it. And you think that's not a lot of people, but it really, really has an impact on those local towns.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting to see, especially like the controversy of using coal in terms of like fuel sources and things like that, energy sources. And I'm sure it impacts those places much heavier than somewhere out west where we're like, whatever, coal.
Well, and the health risks too of being involved in that as well.
Yep.
Did you ever want to get into coal mining since it's so heavily like ingrained in your family's past? Was that ever a path you thought you wanted to take?
It wasn't really a path that I was really sought after, like I really wanted to go do. But whenever I got out of the military, I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. I didn't know how to use the background that I had and the skills that I gained in the military to put that into a job application and get a job that I wanted. So I actually did start with Dad on a strip mine right after I got out in the military. And that was at the same point in time in 2012 when the Obama administration was putting in those Clean Air Act, the emission stuff, like they were really hitting the coal industry hard then. And I worked on that coal mine for about 7 hours. And they brought everybody in the office and like, we're shutting the mine down.
Wow.
Whoa. So I went
7 hours of experience.
Yeah. So I worked on a coal mine for 7 hours.
Nice.
But I took my miner safety course, passed that. I studied really hard for it, and then I got my certification and worked 7 hours in the coal mine. And then they shut it down, and I was like, oh, what am I going to do? My grandpa set me up with somebody that he knew in the oil and gas industry. That's how that got started.
That's well, you know what? It's a resume builder, whatever.
I don't even put it on there
anymore.
They hand wrote me a check for those 7 hours.
They're like, here's your $10 in cash. Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Yeah. So, sort of jumping back now into your research. So, you sort of made this transition, and maybe I mean, you said that you grew up really conservative and that you sort of always leaned towards the oil and gas and that sort of industry as being like, this is fine and it's great for the environment. And now you're transitioning into sort of the geoscience side of things. You're seeing how things impact environmental, with the mussels and the processes that go on. So can I just ask, and feel free not to answer, but where are you now in terms of like, maybe not politically, but just how you view environmental interactions with those industries?
That's a I've answered this question a couple of times, but not recently though. And I think my perspective since I answered this last has changed a little bit. But I was pretty far to the right prior to joining college. I would say like probably 75th percentile, and then I joined college, and that experience of being an undergrad changed me more as a person than anything else I did in my life that I've done. That includes going to war.
Wow.
So you just get so much information. Your mind is opened up to so much in college. But having gone through that caused me to lean pretty far to the left. And probably not as far as I was leaning to the right before, but pretty far to the left. Now I like to think that I'm somewhere like right in the middle. I've learned to not talk down or up about either side, but rather just collect the information and use it how you see fit. So that's what I like try to give to my students. I don't want them to think that coal mining is bad. I don't want them to think environmentalists are killing the economy. Mm-hmm. I just want them to have all of the information, and then they can do with that.
Make an educated decision based off of that. You would be a good governmental employee, that's for sure.
I've thought that. I have thought that, but I don't like being in the spotlight. I would like to be somebody's like right-hand person. Yeah. Like to give them the information and let them go out and stand in front of the cameras.
Yeah.
I don't want to be in front of the camera.
Greg for president.
Yeah. I'll vote for you.
Me too.
Yeah, that's interesting. And the reason why I brought that up, Greg, is because I do think that, we all have opinions about things. And a lot of that is either where we grow up and how we grow up and the environments of which we grow up in. And, a lot of it is our family history on things. But, yeah, it's interesting that as you get older, you just transition into these different, ideologies, basically. And it's nice to know that we have people in the field leading that way of being somewhere in the middle, all oil and gas isn't bad, right? All coal mining probably isn't bad. I'm putting that in quotes because I actually, the facts I don't know. But it's nice when I hear that there are agencies and industries and people like you who actually just try to give the facts, right? Because that's what the science is about. Here are the facts. We don't have to put political opinions on it. We don't have to put, our own agenda on it. We're just giving you the facts. This is what the stats or the quantitative measurements or the qualitative measurements tell us, and now you can go out and make your own educated decision on which side of that you want to be on.
Yeah.
And the something that I've been thinking a lot about with how polarized things have been lately is that I think we all need the skills to be able to communicate with both sides. People who lean very far on the right, people who lean very far on the left. If more people can be sort of mediators for these two sides that honestly hate each other sometimes, I think the world would be a better place. And you're great for that.
There's so much information out there that you can find any information that you want to fit the narrative that you already have made up.
True.
Or you can collect all the information and build a narrative from it.
Yes.
And that's
we need more of the latter.
Yes.
Yep.
Something that is kind of interesting is how that's so ingrained into geosciences. There is a political bias kind of ingrained into, whereas in physics, I can just present these physics theories. There's no bias involved in it at all. I don't have to tell them Newton was a good person or a bad person. Einstein wasn't necessarily a great person. It's just this is the math, this is the facts.
It's because nobody's politicized physics.
Yeah.
Yet.
Yeah, you said it now, Scott. Just kidding. Well, yeah, that's great to hear, and it's nice to know that there's people advocating for the middle line, basically, and just making your own educated decisions, which is something I feel like we need a lot of these days.
Do you find it hard to stay unbiased when you're presenting facts? Does it ever slip through anything?
I mean, yeah, it comes out sometimes. I have my opinions on everything, and I try to keep them just completely out of it. But they come out every now and then.
Yeah.
I keep trying to tell myself, like, all you're doing is giving the information. You're not. But every now and then somebody asks me, like, what is your opinion? And then I'll tell them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair. I mean, everyone who works for the FBI has some sort of opinion about something, right? But they're required to be pretty middleman. They're supposed to be.
Supposed to be.
Cool. So, hopping back to your research, because I feel like a lot of what your personality and just your agenda are telling us is that you're actually a good skill set for this geoscience education. So, what sort of research are you working on at the moment through this program that you're doing?
Yeah, so I have a few different things going right now, but they all really fall under the umbrella of workforce development for our undergraduates. So everything that I do is specifically focused around our undergrads in geosciences. Recently had a paper accepted. I'm still going through the review process of the first part of my research.
Congrats.
Yeah, thanks. That was a real process.
Oh yeah, I also just got a paper published, and hardest thing I've ever done in my life. So.
It beats on you.
Yeah.
I was not prepared for.
And now I'm done. I'm like, all right, let's do another one.
Yeah, you quickly repress the memories of reviewer number 2.
It was reviewer number 2. Like how. Oh, where does your career path have to go to wind up being reviewer number 2? What happened to those poor people?
What I want to know is the questions they're asking reviewer number 2 before they ask them to review a paper. Like, how mean are you going to be?
Just to notice, if you're a reviewer number 2, don't take offense to this.
Yeah.
If you're listening right now and you're reviewer number 2.
Actually, my reviewer number 2 is quite nice.
Okay.
So, I got away with not having a reviewer number 2. Anyway, sorry. So continue on. So all your work's done with undergraduates.
Yeah. So the first part of it that we almost have published, that was looking at workforce skills that our undergraduates they're going to need to have whenever they enter the workforce. So, soft skills like written and oral communication, all the way to hard skills like spatial and temporal understanding. This isn't new. People have tried to tackle this before, and actually there was recently a publication that came out in 2021 called "The Vision and Change of Geosciences." If you haven't looked at that, you should check it out. That talks about the transitioning from undergrad and graduate school to the workforce. So if you're about to make that step, it's something you should check out. And there's been other publications that have looked at specific workforce skills. But not a lot of them have taken into account employer opinions and what they've thought. The Vision and Change had a few dozen employers, and then there was another study that looked at teamwork skills that had 5 or 6 employers that were interviewed in that study. So not a lot of employers have been asked about this, and specifically like those studies, the one in the Vision and Change, they were pretty heavy on oil and gas. And oil and gas doesn't employ a lot of geoscience undergraduates. It's only like 6%. But those employers who participated in that study there were a lot of them from oil and gas, like a quarter of them. So what we wanted to do was survey or get opinions from a wide range of employers in the geosciences. So if you don't know, geosciences is very, very broad. You can work almost anywhere with a geoscience degree. I was recently talking to a friend that's now a geologist in the finance industry. He works for a bank. Yeah. So that shows that you can go a lot of different places with it. And
so
students,
many
yeah. And students and faculty don't. Some faculty do, but a lot of faculty don't know where their students can go to work after they graduate. So I wanted opinions or views from a whole range of employers. And the way that we decided to do that was to read through job advertisements. So job ads are a direct line of communication, and usually the first line of communication between an employer and a potential employee. That's the first communication that's going to happen right there. And employers generally put what is essential for that position, skill-wise, in an advertisement. So we went through and read through each one of them, actually wrote some MATLAB code to read through it for me, made it a lot faster and more accurate, because some of those times when I'm 300 or 400 ads deep and it's like midnight, I might breeze over something. MATLAB won't breeze over it. But yeah, that's the work that we just finished.
And so, what are some of the top 2 or 3 most requested skill sets that these agencies or job advertisements are?
Yeah, so it was very specific to industry sector or the occupation. So industry sector meaning like the environmental sector, doing consulting stuff, or whether you're working for the federal government or stuff like that. And then occupation, you can be a geologist, a geoscientist, an environmental scientist, a soil and plant scientist. Like all that falls under the realm of geoscience. So it was specific to whichever career path you choose. But written communication and field skills transcended occupation and sector. So a lot of employers, like 75% of the ads that I looked at, requested some kind of field skills. That was sometimes, most of that time, they actually didn't say what field skills they were looking for. They just said, you're going to be doing some work in the field. They didn't say specifically what it was, but some of them did say specifically, like you're going to go out to a site and you're going to assess it and evaluate it for us to see if it fits our agenda. Or you're just going to go out and we've got some wells set up. You're going to go out and monitor those wells, like 50 or 60 wells. You're going to keep making your rounds and monitoring those. But then written communication was really highly sought after. So our students need to be able to write. And that mostly came in the form of report writing. Write up some kind of report that states and summarizes the work that you did.
Yeah, interesting. And are all of these job advertisements just from recent years? Like, have you gone back and looked at, like, retrospectively some of the job advertisements and seen if there's been any transitions in what these jobs are requiring in terms of skill sets, or?
No, so I didn't go back and I went back and looked prior to the years that we collected. So I collected advertisements from May to November of 2020. And I got the amount that I wanted to do my analysis, but that was right at the height of COVID taking off, and I wasn't sure if that had any effect on hiring. So I repeated
behind a desk most of the time.
So I repeated the process in May to November of 2021. I collected just about the same amount of advertisements, and then scanned them against each other to see if there were any major differences, and there wasn't. So I didn't make that comparison.
That's a result right there, too. That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there was no changes there. But, the workforce in geoscience is always changing. There's always some kind of new technology coming out. I mean, there's some stuff going on in the third floor lab. Like, you guys are constantly churning out new tools in there.
Yeah.
So the technology is advancing rapidly, and the needs and the stuff that we need to tackle, the challenges of the environment, is always changing. So, those skills are not static. Okay, they're going to change. Maybe not a lot. I'd say stuff like field skills and written communication are always going to be, front runners. But some of the stuff that I didn't see quite as often might pop up 5-10 years down the road as being important. So, I think it's worth doing this study again. Hopefully there's an eager graduate student 10 years from now would like to replicate it.
Yeah, I feel like just from personal experience, like 5 years ago, GIS was the big thing. And I mean, GIS still plays a large part in our field, but I feel now it's transitioned more into coding. Like, you have to know coding in order to get some of these higher up jobs that require you to, know the language behind what's happening in your computer, which is fun. So who knows? In another 5 years, it could just be something completely different, which is, we used to joke around that GIS stood for guaranteed income source, because if you knew GIS, you'd definitely get a job. And I still think you would. Like, a lot of jobs, and maybe Greg, I don't know if you can speak to this, but GIS is still a highly sought after skill that a lot of these job sectors are looking for.
Yeah, it's out there a lot. There's a lot of employers asking for it, and it ranges too. Like, some employers want you to know really in depth how to use GIS, and then some of them are just like, be familiar with it. If our GIS person comes to you with like a question, be able to know what they're talking about. Like, you don't have to do it.
Be able to open up the the app.
Just speak the GIS language.
Yeah.
I predict in 10 years that machine learning is going to be like the standard.
Oh, that's a huge one these days. Machine learning is taking off because, we don't want to mechanically do everything.
No.
We need to automate these processes.
It's getting more accessible, and therefore I think it's just going to continue to explode.
Hopefully they'll have an easier way of teaching it.
Yeah. I'm in a machine learning class right now, and it's not simple. It's not too bad, but it's really not simple.
Right. So this is really exciting. It sounds like you're sort of pioneering some things in the field of geoscience education. What is the most fun thing that you do regarding your research or your Ph.D.? What do you like to do?
Yeah, so if you were to ask me this when I was doing my master's degree, I would say field work. Love going out and working in the field. But my field now is in the computer. I work in my cube and I don't leave it. So there's no more field work for me. But now my fun, I get all of that from working with undergrads. So I didn't do that when I first started working here. I was mostly focused on my research, but then once I, became part of the department, learned who the undergrads were and, what their curriculum looks like the steps that they have to go to get their degree. I could communicate better with them, and I like to think of myself as like a first line for them to ask questions. Just, if you have something that's bugging you, if you have a problem on your resume that you want to work with, or you're about to apply for this job, and our faculty run around in the department, and if you peek in their office and look at them, they're just plugging away on the computers, and they just look so busy. And to an undergrad, I don't know if it was like that whenever you all were undergrad, but when I was an undergrad, that was intimidating.
Oh yeah,
that's intimidating as a grad student.
Still intimidating.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I come from the military lifestyle where everything is like super structured, and I actually thought that I had to follow a chain of command to talk to a professor. So I had to go through the graduate students first to then be able to.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so that took a long time for me to learn that it's not like that.
Karen's like, no, please just email me.
Right. So, and that's intimidating for an undergrad. So hopefully I'm a less intimidating face that they can just pop in real quick, and I'll be like, yeah, let's talk about your resume. Let's talk about this job that you plan on applying to.
As one of your former students, I think that you are very not intimidating.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
and you did great at helping me understand geomorphology. So thank you.
Yeah. Speaking of geomorphology, I get to be the instructor of record for that next year, which I'm really excited about. It'll be my first class that I have all to myself.
Wow.
It's going to be awesome.
Congrats.
It's going to be so great.
So cool.
I'm really excited.
Greg is a great teacher, and
we're going to find out.
Regardless, you'll be really approachable. So that's exciting, and that's really cool. And it's nice to have someone in the department who is someone for the undergrads to lean on. Sometimes, undergrads get sort of lost in the system a little bit. So
yeah, it's really hard for me to figure out where to draw the line between working with the undergraduates and actually completing my research, because I will totally neglect all of my duties to go help an undergrad work on something. So.
I think a lot of us in this room are like that, actually. In fact, all of us in this room right now are like that, which is don't tell our advisors. Yeah, well, it's awesome, Greg. We're happy to have you as part of our department. We think you're doing an amazing job. So If you could describe your work using an analogy, what would you use?
Oh, yeah. So, I guess there's the analogy that a teacher is like a compass. So they guide you on your way through your undergrad to your career. Well, I like to think of my research as the calibration of that compass. So, because geoscience is constantly changing, so should our education techniques and the information we're giving students. And I'm hopefully collected enough of that information to then give to departments to where they can, recalibrate their teaching practices to better fit, what our students are going to encounter.
I like that. Let me ask you a follow-up question. Are you pointing towards true north, or are you pointing towards magnetic north?
That's a good one. Maybe somewhere in between. How about that?
He's the middleman.
Well, I think I think it'd be pointing towards magnetic north, because that's what changes.
That's
over
what's
time.
moving. Yeah, okay.
And that's where we need to set that reference to really know where true north is.
That's good. I like it.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
That's what I'll use from now on.
You answered your own question.
Well, I was just
with
curious.
guidance, with the compass of Greg.
Yeah,
you answered your own question.
Exactly. Proof of concept.
Yeah, you're gonna do a great teaching job, Greg. So Greg, you've had both experiences out in the field and behind your computer and in your research. So can you just tell us, do you have any fun stories from both of those scenarios that you can?
So, fun from the field or fun from the field?
Fun, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, both.
Well, fun stories from my field of study currently. I was recently at a conference. It's called the Earth Educators Rendezvous.
Rendezvous?
Hell yes.
Oh, fancy.
It was fancy. And it was really expensive to go there, but thankfully Karen paid for it.
Where was it?
Minnesota, in Minneapolis. It was my first time actually being there. It was really cool. But it was all about, undergraduate education and how we can, as Earth educators, do a better job at it. And I was in this workshop with all these academics. There was only like 3 graduate students that were in there, and there was probably 30 people or so in there. And they were giving all these suggestions about how to better prepare students for the workforce and how to ensure that students are successful in making their transition to the workforce. And they were having these, somebody would say something and then somebody else would be like, oh, but I lean more this way. I think this is the better approach. And then somebody else would be like, oh, this is the better approach. And while all that was going on, I got a text message from one of my students who the previous week I had been actually for months, we had been helping her try to get this hydrology internship. And she got it. Yeah. And she sent me that text while that was all going on. And I laughed out loud. I LOL'd.
LOL'd.
Yeah.
Literally.
And the people at my table, and we had to set randomly, so I didn't know the people at my table. And they were like, what are you laughing about? I was like, well, while all of you are arguing about how to get your students employed, I'm over here doing it.
Oh my God.
And I showed them that. And I felt like I was so proud of myself for like 30 seconds. And then it just faded away.
That's awesome. Yeah. Education's a tough one because a lot of it is theoretical. Yeah. And then the application of it is quite different from what sometimes you learn or what you think is the best way of going about things. So it's really cool that you could just this is how you do it, or this is what I did, and it worked, But it might not work that way for every student that you come across, right? Yep. So, yeah, that's awesome.
Every classroom that you, as an instructor in, it's like the class has a mind of its own, and every one of them are completely different. When I was at Alabama, each semester we had to TA 3 labs of 30 students. So I had 90 students each semester across 3 different classes, and all 3 of them would always be completely different. And I would have to approach how I taught each one of those classes just slightly different to match the personality of the class.
You think it's like a group think thing?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you'll get a classroom of 30 students who nobody knows anybody, because these are entry-level introductory classes where students from the whole university are taking them. And then sometimes you'll get a group of students who have been friends forever,
Yeah.
or you'll get a group of athletes who all know each other.
Mm-hmm.
And each dynamic, is different.
Totally.
I experienced that same thing. I'm teaching 6 credits of physics lab, and also like 24 students per lab, and the dynamic's super different. Also depending on the day, like the Friday at 10:30 in the morning class is a lot different than my Wednesday at 10:30 class, energy-wise. And also just the way that the schedules line up, I end up getting a lot of similar majors in different classes. So like I almost have a full like kinesiology physics lab, a full construction management physics lab, and just the way that I have to approach the science to them to like get them to be excited about it's definitely like a lot different.
Do you like a class that has more or less energy?
I like more energy, for
Yes,
sure.
Definitely.
Well,
I feel like you can channel that to whatever
Absolutely.
you want to.
Absolutely.
But it's hard to get a class with no energy going.
So I actually started this little experiment myself. I told the students to rate the labs on how comfortable they felt on the topic after the lab. And the first week was super interesting because the people that rated it higher, they were the ones who didn't ask me questions about it. They ended up getting worse scores on their lab report than the people who had less confidence and were like asking me more questions about it.
Yeah.
And like that's the energy's coming from them like talking to me and like having a discussion about the topic basically. So I think in the end they ended up learning more than the students that didn't ask the questions, even though they felt more comfortable with it. So
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most important parts of being an instructor is how to promote that kind of interaction.
Yeah.
And get that going to where then it just becomes natural. Like you don't have to push to get them to interact with you. They do it organically.
The other thing's the jokes. I'll occasionally make like a joke and I'll make it to all my classes, and sometimes it hits really hard and other times like nobody laughs at all.
Yeah.
So it's like I don't know what that's
like,
about.
crickets in the background.
That's like one time my class like cracked up laughing. We were laughing for like a minute, and then the other time like nobody laughed at all.
Not even a pity laugh?
Like maybe a little bit of chuckle. But then I was like, oh, that hit really, really well in my other class. Like, why didn't you guys laugh?
When your instructor goes out of their way to make a horrible joke, sometimes a pity laugh is
all it takes.
appreciated. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want your pity.
Oh, that's awesome though. I'm what a cool experience, especially at a rendezvous.
Right?
Yeah. So what about out in the field, like field?
Yeah, so before I started this, everything that I did was pretty field heavy. My master's degree was very field heavy, a lot of field work there. But this one time that I was working in the field, I was by myself, and I was out collecting data in the Sipsey River of Alabama. So the reason why I chose that river is because it's completely, well, it's not completely, but it's really unaltered by humans. There's 3 bridges that cross that river, and that's the only interaction on that watershed, the whole watershed. And that river is like 70 miles long.
Wow.
So if there is something that reflects a natural system, it would be that river. So that's why I was doing my measurements there. So it's pretty remote. There's a few houses that live close to the banks. And I had access to part of the river through a property owner who had an agreement with the biology department at UA. And while I was out there, I was taking these bank measurements, and I had this fancy gizmo that I was out there measuring the height of the bank and the angle and the different layers that were in it of soil. And in the rivers in the south, there are a lot of trees that hang out over the bank. It kind of creates a canopy over the river. And I was walking up underneath one of those trees, and I was pushing the branches out of the way so that I could see the bank, and I pushed a branch out of the way, and there was a cottonmouth sitting on the limb looking right at me. So cottonmouth is a venomous snake in the south, and they have a reputation of just being evil. And I was like, oh no, like I'm out here by myself, what am I going to do? And I'm not really afraid of snakes, but I knew that situation was pretty bad if I would have got bitten.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'll just back away and come back to this spot in a little bit, see if it's moved. And as soon as I started to move backwards, it fell out of the tree in the water. So those snakes have a reputation too of like just being kamikazes. They'll just like drop out of the trees right on you. They'll land in people's boats. It's like if you're boating down the river down there, you have to be cognizant of what's in the trees above you because they'll fall into the boat. And the water there is constantly milky. so you can't see very far into it. And that snake hit the water and just disappeared. And I'm like panicking that it's gonna bite me like under the water. And I have my waders on, and I'm trying to like get out of there, and I turn around and I hit my shin on a cypress knee. So cypress trees grow up in the south, and when they die, they leave behind their roots, and they stay there for a long time. They call them cypress knees, and they hurt. They're really painful if you kick one, and if they're under the water, you can't see them. So I turned and I kicked one of those, and I fell in over my waders, and the water was only like 5 feet deep, and it really wasn't that cold, so I probably could have been without the waders, but I had them on anyway. And if you've ever been in waders and you fill them up with water, you go from being like 150 pounds to 500 pounds.
Oh no.
Impossible to move. So here I am in this river with my shin hurting, my waders full of water. I'm like flailing in the water trying to get to the other side to get out on the bank. And there's this like 800-foot long terrifying snake trying to get me in the water.
800 foot.
Yeah. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit.
Wait, how long are they actually though? Like,
they're not that big.
Tens.
Probably 3 feet.
3, okay.
Yeah, I mean they grow big or small than that, but most of them are around that length.
Okay.
Anyway, I get to the bank on the other side. I didn't get snake bit, but I crawl out, and the property owner was standing there and watched the whole thing. And he's like crying, laughing so hard at my unfortunate situation.
Oh my god.
Oh man.
So at least somebody got a good laugh out of it. It didn't go completely unnoticed.
And you're alive, so.
Yeah, and I'm alive.
Oh my god, that's really funny. I'm not a big fan of snakes. I thought rattlesnakes are bad. If I saw a cottonmouth, that would be it for me. I'd be like, I'm never doing field work ever again.
Oh, man. Now I'm questioning whether all of the times in the field where I've had embarrassing things happen to me and I thought I was alone, I wonder if there was someone watching and laughing.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you're never alone, Scott.
Never.
Those are pretty funny.
That's good.
Yeah, those are good stories. I like those stories. Good campfire stories.
Yes.
Well, we normally do some other segments, but I think we're going to actually maybe wrap up your awesome conversation that we've had today.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you some more serious questions.
Serious question.
So we're going to do a would you rather sort of scenario.
Cool. Very serious.
So the first one is, would you rather always have Cheeto dust, like Cheetos, the snack, on your hands, or always have jelly on your feet?
If I lick that Cheeto dust off my finger, does it repopulate and I can do it
Immediately.
again?
Oh.
Definitely the Cheeto dust.
We're into the Cheeto dust. I like it.
You would definitely need like a permanent thing over your keyboard.
That's perfectly fine.
Yeah, he doesn't. He doesn't he'll get it on his keyboard because then he could lick his keyboard as well.
Exactly.
God.
Okay, second one. Would you rather sweat honey or always smell like cabbage?
That's brutal. Smell like cabbage. Yeah, I can plug my nose.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't like being sticky. That's why I didn't like the South. You're always sticky down there.
You were literally sweating honey down there. What about you guys? Scott?
Agree, I would not like to be sticky with honey all the time. I sweat a lot, so.
Plus, if I'm licking the Cheetos off my fingers, I don't want honey getting in there.
Oh yeah, that would
It
be
could
a
be a
recipe
really
for
nice
disaster.
combination. I don't know.
Maybe. I'm going to have to try that now.
Be a new flavor.
Imagine the Cheetos particles will sort of clump with the honey, and I don't think it would be very good.
Yeah.
I don't know. What about you, Brian?
I don't really sweat that much, so I might say honey. The thing I'd have to consider is if the honey would evaporate off of me still and cool me down. Because if it wouldn't do that, then sweating would probably make me more hot, and that would probably be problematic for exercising and whatnot. So.
This is how scientists take your simple would you rather question and blow it way out of proportion.
This is right. This is why I'm asking the questions. We get the most
That's what it's
complicated answer. I'm sure Brian's going to go home and calculate like the ratio of honey to cabbage.
And I'm dipping Cheetos in honey.
Yeah. Okay. Would you rather have lobster claws for hands or squid tentacles for legs?
Just 2 tentacles or like 8 tentacles?
Good question.
8.
I would say
Like Squidward?
I would say like Squidward.
Yeah.
Okay.
Squidward, yeah. Like you got, yeah.
Squidward or Mr. Krabs?
Yeah, I think I would go Squidward.
Yeah, I feel like lobster claws would be really hard to do anything
Oh, yeah.
with. Would you rather have a baby giraffe or a baby elephant as a pet?
Oh.
Elephant.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Why?
they're adorable. And they play a lot.
They are. I don't know what baby giraffes do.
I have no idea.
Just
I feel
I
like
think
I've
they're
never
so
seen
adorable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, I don't think I've seen one either. And they're
How
probably
big are they?
bigger than me.
Oh, they're really big still.
Mm.
I think they're still probably like taller than a human. I think. I don't know.
baby giraffes.
I thought so.
I think they can't even stand when they're first born.
Oh yeah.
Just clumsy little.
Well, they like fall
They're all
when they're
legs.
born because their moms are so tall. They fall, and that fall is what like snaps the umbilical cord. And then they just hit the ground like pretty hard, and like I saw this on National Geographic a while ago. I'm not exactly sure, but I'm pretty sure it like hits the ground and then like takes like a day for it to be able to like get up and actually like start walking around and whatnot. So.
Yeah. I think I've heard that too.
Yeah.
Now I just feel traumatized by this experience. Welcome to National Geographic. No, that's awesome. You learn something new every day.
Yeah.
Okay. Sort of like a last question, more philosophical, because I feel like I always ask people this question. It kind of goes along with what I ask them. So I always ask people, like, would you rather spend a lifetime out in space or a lifetime in the deep ocean here on Earth? So would you rather have a rocket ship or a submarine?
I like the water. Yeah, so I'd probably have a submarine.
Yeah. There's some cool, crazy things down in the ocean.
Yeah. I just saw that some company is putting on, they're now taking tickets for a submarine ride down to see the Titanic.
Really?
It's like $250,000.
Wow.
You can ride down and see the Titanic.
And you like watch Titanic as you're going down.
The best way to throw away 250 grand.
Right?
Yeah, when I win the lottery, I think I probably still won't spend money on that, but
Yeah,
you
I don't
know.
know.
I wonder how long of a trip it would be
I don't know.
to get down there.
Yeah.
What is it? It's a mile down or so?
I mean, I guess it's kind of cool, but 250 grand? Wow.
Well, that's versus how many millions of dollars it takes for your 8 seconds in space.
That's fair. That's fair.
That's true. And you don't even go to space. You just go to like the edge of the atmosphere.
Right.
Oh, yeah. I would totally do that over Jeff Bezos's crap.
Right?
What about you guys? Would you rather have a rocket ship or a submarine?
It's got to be a rocket ship.
Yeah,
There's way more to
I
investigate.
figured the physics guy would say rocket ship.
It'd be close for me. I don't know. Because I think the rocket ship I lean towards because I could take a rocket ship to an Earth-like planet and then explore like other oceans and I could see more. Has a bigger payoff in my mind.
Maybe you just have like a hovercraft with a rocket ship and a submarine.
A rocket submarine craft that can go in any environment at all.
You know, I'm changing my answer now actually because I'd probably waste a lot of my life in outer space just flying to the next planet. And like I wouldn't have enough time to like actually look at things.
What if you could hibernate during that
Yeah,
time?
it depends
true.
on what's allowed.
There's a
or
lot of
not. But
variables.
if we just have regular technology on our side, maybe I think I'd actually do a submarine because I'd be able to
Completely.
investigate a lot more.
You
That's
couldn't
true.
see anything if
Yeah.
it were actual
My whole
human
life would just be
timescales.
like getting to the different planets here, and that's all I'd be able to really look at.
Yeah.
So
And there's a lot of nothing in space.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
That's why they call it space.
you're gonna need a lot of good books or something on submarines
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
read. Greg, thank you so much for coming on our podcast. You are awesome. We're so proud to have you and to, claim you as one of our own.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I was excited whenever you offered me the opportunity to do this.
Yeah,
Thank you.
well, come back and visit us, and we'll keep people updated on your progress.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
You're gonna do amazing things. So
yeah. Congrats again on your publication.
Thanks.
Huge accomplishment.
Such a weight lifted.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks again.
Yeah.
Thanks, Greg. Have an epic day.
Well, that was an epic conversation.
We'd like to thank all of our listeners.
Tune in next time for another Epic Earth podcast.
Let's do one more sound check. I'm Brian. It's one microphone now.
I'm Greg, and I'm now further away from the microphone.
I'm Ashley, and I am in the same spot.
I'm Microphone, and I'm further away from Scott.